Well, the potential tropical cyclone 9 is fairly close to be upgraded to a tropical storm. We're going to talk about that. A lot of conflicts in the models about how strong this is going to get before it heads for the Florida Panhandle. So we'll run it all down for you. Talk about all the ramifications for the weather across, particularly across the deep south, where it will probably get rather serious for even for inland areas. And of course, we'll concentrate on that little bit of rain that snuck in today in a few places in parts of the Northeast. I don't
Yeah,
know
it
if
snuck in.
it did, and now it's sneaking out, and more, all sorts of other stuff tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And of course, you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast if you shop on Amazon by using the referral link that's pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also under the descriptor to this podcast. You search for your stuff, you buy it. Amazon will throw Joe and I back a little bit of coin, and everybody's happy. And we do appreciate your support if you shop our referral link on Amazon. So, you and I always play this game during the course of the year. Who's going to get to 91st? Who's going to get to 81st? Who's going to get to 41st? Who's going to get to 31st? But we never talk about who's going to have a tropical storm move right over their house. And that's
Well,
where and that's where I'm sitting. Some of you may not know this, but Joe's up in the Putnam Valley. I'm here in the mountains of North Georgia, and every time I've been looking at guidances for the last several days, particularly looking at every model today to see how close it comes to going over my roof. And I'm 300 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, I'm not. It's not like it's down the block here, folks. I'm 300 miles north near the North Carolina state line. So a remnant tropical storm, a vigorous low and an upper low that's impacting all of this, does, in all seriousness, for areas in, we'll talk about the coast, of course, but for areas inland in Georgia, in Alabama, South Carolina, Western North Carolina, and into Eastern Tennessee, there could be some pretty gusty winds and also the potential for the outbreak of some severe weather. And then, of course, right along the Gulf Coast, where does landfall may happen? How strong is it going to be when it gets on land? Of course, Mr. Rayo knows the answers to all these questions I'm throwing out there.
well, I got to tell you something, Joe. It's I am not envious of you, but this is one thing that I'm happy that you're going to get it first and maybe only. I'm really I do not need, and none of us up here in the tri-state area would like to see any kind of a tropical system pass directly over our area. But unfortunately for you, it looks like sometime, on Friday, sometime around noontime, that storm is going to be. By that time, I assume it's going to be a depression, but there's going to carry with it quite a bit of rain and gusty winds. It looks like, and in fact, it's looking more now like this system may end up being a Cat 2 or Cat 3 storm when it makes landfall at the Florida Panhandle sometime during the mid afternoon hours on Thursday. A very, very potent system indeed. And we're watching it right now. The only ones who have any kind of a warning or watch or whatever are in western sections of Cuba and along the eastern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. It looks like the storm may actually go right through the channel between Yucatan and West Cuba during the day on Wednesday, and then emerge into the Gulf of Mexico, and then start its movement up toward the Florida Panhandle, making again landfall sometime during the early to mid afternoon hours of Thursday. With well, I see here the Hurricane Center is making reference to possibly a major hurricane. So that means that it could very well be a Cat 3 when it makes landfall on Thursday, sometime later in the
Well,
day.
there are some. I mean, it's a wide range. You've got some models. There's an endless number of models, of course. But we got them in a range from a Cat 2 to a few of them have it as several of them have it as a Cat 4, and two models have it as a Cat 5 going on land. I was looking at some of the hurricane specific hurricane models like the HWRF and the HFS. What is it? The HFAS. They've got so many of them. I've lost complete track, but one of them took it down to like 898 millibars before landfall. Well, it'll be interesting. I mean, there's lot of things here that the strength is uncertain. I know the Hurricane Center talked about the fact that number of the more reliable models that they use to determine a system that's going to strengthen rapidly are pointing to a rapidly strengthening hurricane once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. So there is some support for this to certainly get to at least a Cat 3, and maybe even beyond that. I think in terms of you look at this whole thing as in a broad package. Uh, this might wind up being a storm that has going to have impacts over a very large area of geography. The emphasis initially will be on the coast, but I just don't want to downplay what could happen in inland areas because of this upper low that's coming down and interacting with it, and you're going to have, I'm pretty sure you're probably going to wind up with a rather robust outbreak of severe weather, and there'll probably be more than just a handful of tornadoes along and east of the storm track once it goes inland. So there's a lot here to kind of filter through. And we got a couple of days. Not that we're going to be live straight through for a couple of days, or we have at least as long as we want to here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And I've got the floater loop up. And while it's up, let me just give everybody a quick hello from Joe and I to everybody on the chat board. And to those of you who are lurking in the background, yes, Bill Goodman, I'm talking to you. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday when there's a storm running around. And of course, if we do decide to add a show for Friday, we'll let you know ahead of time. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And of course, if you like the show, hit the like button. Now, this is the floater satellite loop, which basically holds the center in the middle of the picture. So you see the latitude and longitude move around instead. It's very useful in trying to determine motion, among other things. And the one thing I can notice up right off the bat, Joe, this thing is not in any rush at the moment. It seems to be crawling along at probably under 5 miles an hour. The other thing is that I'm noticing the center is just on the west, or at least on the first frame. It's on the western edge of this convection. There's some shear going on the west side. The clouds are getting blown away from southwest to northeast. But in the last hour or two, it looks like the center is starting to get tucked in over that heavier convection to the east, which is where the strongest winds. That's where the recon found the strongest winds this afternoon. So it does look like it's organizing, and I got to think it'll probably be up. It'll probably organize enough to be upgraded to a tropical storm by tomorrow morning, and then after that, uh, it's just a matter of watching the development and how it interacts with what's going on upstream.
You know, in terms of the possibility for severe weather, now we know it probably is going to be at least a minimal hurricane by Thursday heads toward the as it heads toward the Florida Panhandle, and likely it'll be even stronger than that. And yet, when I check the convective outlook for day
Yeah, they're
4,
not gonna they're not gonna put it in yet.
yeah, but even with a strong tropical storm, there is that possibility. Now, they said predictability too low for severe weather on Thursday. And the definition of predictability too low, according to SPC, is they use that to indicate severe storms may be possible based on some model scenarios. However, the location or occurrence of severe storms are in doubt due to one, large differences in the deterministic model solutions. And
Which
I must
you
say that
have.
I mean, like all the models, all the short-term models are pretty much pointing to the same area in the Panhandle of Florida.
Right.
So I don't think that there's large differences, or two, large spreads in the ensemble guidance, and or three, minimal run to run continuity. I would still, Joe, for day four, and maybe at least along the immediate Florida Panhandle coast, I put
They'll
something up to indicate that
yeah,
there's.
they'll have it in tomorrow. It's in day three, so they definitely will have something there tomorrow. I think this maybe was an instance of let's kick the can down the road as far as we can before we have to make a commitment.
Well,
Um,
absolutely. That's why the only places right now that have any kind of advisory or watch is in western Cuba and eastern Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The U.S. at this moment in time is free and clear. Now, I hope. Now, this is where the television weathercasters play a role here, because if we were just relying on the National Weather Service or the National Hurricane Center, people in Florida, the Panhandle of Florida, be going la di da. Okay, I'm gonna do my regular shopping today, and based upon what is being forecast, at least by the U.S. National Weather Service, there isn't anything that would even hint at any kind of activity. But it's the television and radio meteorologists who are probably saying right now on the local airwaves, watch out, Thursday is going to be tough. Thursday is going to be the day. Get ready, go out, go to the supermarkets, do whatever you need to do and be prepared, because by then it's going to be the. And for those who are listening, they will start making preparations 4 days in advance. But for the moment, at least, according to the NOAA people, with not even a watch or an advisory in effect, it's like, okay, it's that kind of thing.
well,
And that,
since you brought the subject up, um, I was looking just I'm just looking around here at some of the Weather Service offices. If you read their area-wide discussions, their area forecast discussions, they've gotten into giving at least some details and not being broad. But the thing, and I don't think it's any secret that most of just about everybody knows. I mean, even up here, they're talking about here in the North Georgia mountains. So, I mean, the information is getting out there. I would just say, one of the things, and I'm a fan of the Weather Service. I think they do a great job
so am I.
overall, and so would I. Okay, now I'm reading the digital forecast here. This is from Tallahassee, and I actually for the city of Tallahassee. So they have for Wednesday night, and they got chance of showers or storms, and showers and thunderstorms after 8 p.m. For Thursday, tropical storm conditions possible. And also for Thursday night, tropical storm conditions possible. So they got it in there. I mean, they've got something in there. I just got a kick out of because I have the Atlanta office, Peachtree, covers North Georgia. I I had to laugh at this only because of the fact that I'm reading through the digital forecast for my town, Blairsville, which is about 20 miles south of the North Carolina state line, and I'm about maybe 35 miles south from the North Carolina, Georgia, uh, Tennessee triple point, where the three states meet. Um, anyway, I'm reading through the forecast. All right, Thursday, a chance of showers and thunderstorms before 8 a.m. Then a chance of showers between 8 and 2 p.m. Then showers likely with a possible thunderstorm after 2 p.m. Cloudy with a high of 71. Thursday night, showers and possibly a thunderstorm. Some of the storms could produce heavy rainfall, a low of 63. I'll leave the precip probabilities out. Friday, showers likely and possibly a thunderstorm until 2 p.m. Then a chance for showers and thunderstorms after 2 p.m. Some of the storms could produce heavy rainfall, partly sunny. Okay. And finally, the word windy appears. I mean, could it just like, was it too much to at least put breezy in the Thursday night forecast? And they finally stuck the word windy in there. But, my point is sometimes you read these digital forecasts that they put out for public consumption, and I know that it's done in a computerish sort of way. they put the data in, and then the computer sort of half, three quarters writes the forecast out, and puts all those times in and everything else. But I just somebody reading that is going to look at that and say, well, what's all this hubbub about?
Yeah, in fact, we were talking about this at the Tri-State Weather Conference on Saturday. Gil Simmons, who is the chief meteorologist at WTNH in New Haven, who I used to work with at News 12. I mean, he was in Connecticut, I was in Westchester, but we were discussing about the fact that we, real live people, human beings, are providing a detailed forecast, and meanwhile, people are calling up the station and complaining because they have the News 12 app or the WTNH 8 app on their phone, weather app, and the weather app is telling them something completely different than what we are calling for.
Right.
They're simply, the weather app simply works off of or directly off of the computer models and then tries to put it into a worded summation for you to understand. And Gil was saying, "Oh, look at that!" Pointing to his phone. He said, "I see on Wednesday a big cloud with raindrops. What does that mean?" It's
Well,
and
that's the thing, and now, of course, we're in a situation here where apps are going to be changing every 5 minutes, especially as we get closer.
And
Let's
then people
run.
get it. And then he says people get very upset. They said, "Well, why is it that they don't have your forecast on the phone, and why are they using that forecast?" And like, I I remember, and I'm sure remember too, television and the corporate people over in the hierarchy of Cablevision and what Gil is dealing with. WTNH is an ABC affiliate, by the way, so maybe he's dealing with Disney. I don't know, but the thing is that we live in a society that wants everything immediately, if not sooner. And so this is the way that the corporate people deal with this. They get the direct information from the latest computer information or computer guidance and feed it into your phone, as opposed to somebody actually looking at it and ferreting through it and making corrections and whatever like that. And this is the now. Interestingly, Joe, I'm looking at the Tallahassee discussion here, the forecast discussion, and it says over the next 72 to 96 hours, primary focus will be the approach and impact from potential tropical cyclone 9. And what they're talking about is what they are putting the emphasis on is the rain, 3 to 6 inches of rain with isolated heavier amounts of up to 10 inches. They're mentioning rain, flash flooding, considerably near the core of the storm, blah, 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 blah. And they're really not saying anything or much of anything in terms of wind.
Right.
They do eventually get to it, but they're putting the emphasis on rain, floods, all this blah blah in their forecasts. And meanwhile, you and I were talking about a potential Cat 2 or even a Cat 3 storm making landfall at the Panhandle. We know that there's going to be massive, if this pans out, there's going to be massive tidal flooding or coastal flooding, storm surge, and we also know there's going to be major winds, which likely will bring down power lines and cause a. But so far, if you live in the Panhandle, you're being told that the big problem, and it is going to be a problem, but the major problem is not going to be so much the wind, but will be the flooding, the flash flooding.
Well, it's Tuesday. I'm sorry. It's what day of the week is this
It's
now? It's
Monday.
Monday. It's
It's Monday.
Monday. We're
Landfall
talking
and landfall is on Thursday. So
Thursday. So, tomorrow, I'm sure we're probably going to see more more details in terms of wind. I think they're just basically trying. No, I don't think they want to go out there and say, we're going to have a 100 mile an hour winds at this point. You guess you want to just kind of wait for the hurricane, the tropical system to strengthen up to a certain point, and then you can throw it in with some
there
confidence.
there are
So,
four paragraphs from Tallahassee in their weather discussion regarding the tropical system. It is not until you get to paragraph 4 that you read about the potential significant and major coastal flood threat, especially for Appalachia Bay.
right,
Whoever wrote the summation here said, as we all know, Appalachia Bay is especially sensitive to large and small variations in track, intensity, and forward speed, which can cause major adjustments to the surge impacts. Nevertheless, at this point, confidence is increasing of a significant and major coastal flood impact in Appalachia Bay in association with this system. As we get close to the landfall, we'll have more details and specific surge values, which I would agree on. But again, most of this discussion is hitting on the rain and not mentioning really much of anything on winds, which, as we just pointed out along the coast, could very well, for a short time at least, exceed 75 miles per hour, which could again lead to a lot of power outage. By the way, Joe, I mean, with this system, admittedly, it'll be mostly a depression and well past its prime when it reaches you. But are you at all concerned, not so much about the rain, but losing power? Do you have a generator to work off of if you
I
do
do
lose?
not have a generator. I think it may. I think it might still be at a tropical storm status by the time it gets to me.
Yeah,
Because I'm looking at even on the global models, the GFS has got a 975 pressure going right over my house. So I think I probably, this is my argument with respect to that upper low, creating some baroclinic effects after it goes inland, and that the system will hold together a bit longer than it otherwise would. So that's my primary concern, that, at least when it gets up into the northern part of Georgia, that you're still going to have, you're not going to have a hurricane, um, but you still might have a mid-level tropical storm in terms of top winds by the time it gets on top, sustained winds. And of course, here in the mountains, there'll be all sorts of gusts going on in one way or another. Throw in, um, uh, potential for severe weather. I mean, I'm certainly concerned that I might lose power, but I'm more concerned about the fact that I got trees that they're probably some of the tallest trees you have ever seen. But I'm in the woods. I'm on the side of a mountain. So if I've got a wind that's mostly, say, between northeast and southeast, I'm kind of shielded. The will come over the top, and but the tops of the trees will sway, but sometimes when it's really windy around here where I am, you don't feel it so much when you're outside, when you're out the so-called surface here at 2,200 feet. But while you're standing there and you're not feeling much of anything, or maybe the lightest of breezes, you look up and the trees are bending like this. So I am concerned about that. And I think most of my North Georgia friends are concerned about that. Although I have a pat answer, by the way, when somebody asks me about the weather, and they say, "Well, my app says," and then they go on blah blah blah, and I say, "Well, that's fake weather." Just like fake news. Yes, people accuse people of putting on articles when they post on social media. They'll call something fake news. I call it fake weather. So
you know,
anyway,
four days out, you don't want to cause any kind of massive, oh my God, you don't want to do that. I can understand why there are no, significant advisories or watches that have been placed in effect. But we're going to be within 3 days tomorrow. And Tom Contino, you're saying on the chat board, lawsuits may follow. They are completely underdone. Not necessarily. I mean,
no, they
I
are
mean,
not.
it's
They're
four,
doing what they're doing what they probably should do. There's no secret here. It's not like, it's some sort of secret forecast that nobody knows. Everybody's got social media. People watch shows like
right.
this, and
But
plus you've got the hypers out there going all crazy about it going to be a Cat 5, because they're cherry picking off
right.
one model, which you can't that's pushed. You could talk about that amongst your weather friends, but I don't know that I would go out with that publicly. But that's what they're doing. So it's not like nobody knows,
Well,
unless you're
again,
living in a hole.
that's why I say that, and especially today. I mean, it's so different than it was 20, 30, 40 years. 20, 30, 40 years ago, when Joe and I were, in the business, we used to go semi regularly to our news directors or executive producers to try to explain to them, in certain situations, this is important. We ought to kick it up to the top of the headlines at the top of the news, and they just would look at us with a blank stare and say, "What are you talking about? It's weather. It's no, big deal. There's so many other things that we need to talk about, like unscrupulous politicians or death and murders and whatever like that. Why are you bothering us with weather?" Now all of a sudden, now, weather literally drives the nightly newscast. Even if it's sunny, everybody wants to know what the weather is going to be about. And that's why I say this is the time when the radio and TV meteorologists and weathercasters are doing their thing to alert you to what may be coming on Thursday. Whereas the Weather Service, the federal government agency, does not want to alarm anybody yet, but they're putting out just a modicum of information to alert you. And again, the thing is, I'm concerned about is that people, Joe, will look at their phones and they'll either they'll see nothing of any significance or they'll see
Well,
wind, rain, hurricanes,
the
that
phone
kind of
apps are model driven, so if the model's showing a hurricane, it probably has a hurricane. It
a
has heavy
hurricane
rain or
symbol,
something.
a hurricane
Yeah,
symbol on Thursday.
right. So let's exactly. So let's run through what's going on. This is the 8 o'clock advisory from the Hurricane Center. I mean, they still have it as a potential tropical cyclone. Intermediate advisory 2A, 18.3 north, 82.3 west. Top winds 35 miles an hour, moving north northwest at 7. They have it becoming a tropical storm overnight by sometime Wednesday morning as it passes through the Yucatan Channel, becomes a hurricane, and then right before landfall, which it looks like they have it on the map, it's southeast of Panama City, Apalachicola, right in that general idea, south or southeast of those two cities. They have it as a major hurricane coming in. By 2 p.m. Friday, they have it as down to a depression. Um, so in 24 hours, it's going to move. That's the other thing here. It's going to start accelerating when it gets into the eastern Gulf. So you're going to have a system that's moving at a fairly decent clip. So that's going to also put some, create more wind issues, particularly, once it goes inland, you're going to have obviously the storm is going to weaken off its peak intensity. But again, as I said earlier, as it pushes its way inland, if the low pressure is moving at 20 or 25 miles an hour, there's some momentum here that's going to cause some higher wind gusts, even as far north as eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina, northern Georgia, and western South Carolina. All right, so the recon. I want to see if there's a. They had a recon earlier. I don't know when the next one is. So this is all right. So this was mission one. I just want to show you from what they found. Now, if you look at the wind bars, okay, one of the things you look for to see if there's a closed circulation is you look for a northwest wind, and you got it. And all these light blues that you see here, um, particularly west and southwest of the center, are showing a rather large area of northwest winds, but they're only at about 10 to 20 knots. So the center was probably right over. I'm going to just put an obnoxious looking X there. So you got northwest winds, and then on the south side you got west winds. Then on the other side you go to south winds, and then you go to northeast winds in the northeast quadrant. So or southeast winds in the northeast quadrant. So um, there's not because the center is at least earlier was not really tucked in underneath where all the convection is. You're not seeing any kind of robust winds. But when you look on the east side and you go out about 60 or 70 miles. There is a band of south southeast winds, these greens and darker greens. The light green is 40 to 45. The darker greens are 34 to 40 knots. The lighter greens are 45 to 50, 40 to 45, and there's some yellows in there, and those are 45 to 50 knots. So you already have tropical storm force winds, at least at flight level, on the east side. It's a matter of getting the center to tighten up into where it becomes well defined. And then once that happens, this will just go, they're just going to up, assuming that the wind profile doesn't change very much, or certainly it won't weaken. I don't think it would, but if it's the same as what it was, if the wind profile is the same and they can find a well-defined center on their next recon pass, this will be upgraded to a tropical storm. And as far as the guidance goes, This is the 18Z guidance. The 0Z guidance, which they sent out early yesterday, probably won't be out for another hour. Um, the track model guidance has actually shifted to the left from earlier today, not by a lot, but at least by 30 or 40 miles, if not more. Now there were no outliers that go into the Florida Big, the southern part of the Florida Big Bend. There were one or two of them overnight and this morning. They're all clustered right in that where the Panhandle makes that little hump that jettisons out into the Gulf of Mexico. They're all clustered there, uh, around Panama City or so, right in that zone, and then going northward up through West Georgia, and then swinging northwestward into Tennessee and Kentucky. And it's making that turn because it's going to be rotating around the upper low, which I have here on the GFS to take a look at. You can see how the upper air changes over over this past weekend, and now we're into today. Here comes this diving trough shortwave into the Dakotas, and it closes off in Iowa and Missouri. So you got this upper low that drops down into Arkansas. By the time we get to Wednesday night, your tropical system is down here, so your upper flow is like this. So it's going to get caught in that and just shoot right up. And of course, as the influence of the upper low gets stronger, the system's going to start moving even faster. So if you believe the GFS, it's the GFS on this run is a little bit is to the right of those tracking models. So the landfall is a little bit later. It's a little bit more toward the Florida Big Bend on the upper portion of it, and that would be at 8 o'clock Thursday evening. And then it just gets catapulted up and around the upper low. It just rotates right around it. And this is a very, very unusual situation. And if you're asking the question, well, how come it can't come up the East Coast? Well, you got an upper low sitting that's dropping down into northern New England and a northwest flow that goes all the way down to southern Pennsylvania and southern New Jersey. It can't buck that. Okay. There's also an upper high that's building around it on the other side, that's back in New Mexico. And so this system is basically trapped underneath all of the feature to the northeast and the feature to the west. So it's to me, looking at this, you could almost say that it's impossible for it to for moisture to head up the eastern seaboard with this type of upper air pattern.
Agreed, absolutely agreed. The high is trying to almost cradle, if you will, in its arms, or bending around the upper low and the hurricane coming in from the Gulf. And again, that other upper disturbance that's moving across New England, keeping the entire Northeast in a strong northwesterly flow. So, where can that system go? It can't possibly, as you just mentioned, Joe, it can't possibly come northward up into some of the rain, the associated outer uh, flank of the rain may make it as far north as northern North Carolina or southern Virginia, but that's about it. That's about all she wrote. Most of the activity is going to be concentrating once it hits the Big Bend area of Florida. It's going to go north. And again, one of the people on the chat board, I forgot who it was, said, weird looking path. Well, yeah, it's not often that you see a storm from the Gulf of Mexico take a track inland to the north and northwest. Usually, when they come in from the Gulf of Mexico, it goes northeast, maybe heads for the Atlantic seaboard and up the Atlantic. This is not one of those scenarios. This is a very unusual situation that we'll be looking at in the days to come.
Not when your westerlies are up near the Canadian border. And by the way, this shortwave, this trough that's in the eastern part of the United States, if you go back maybe about a week or so ago on the GFS, you'll find that the model actually dug that trough back into the western portions of the Great Lakes. Now that would have meant this is when the models were trying to shoot something up from various runs up the East Coast or just off the East Coast. Well, look at reality now. Instead, that trough is not doing that. It's actually digging down into New England and into Atlantic Canada. And of course, that leaves everything else blocked off. And that's pretty much where we are. The intensity guidance, by the way, and very interesting. You've got just about all of them have it at least as a Cat 1. You've got a number of them as a Cat 2. You've got uh, more than several of them as a Cat 3. You've got two of them that three of them actually that take it to Cat 4 or higher. Two of them take it up to a Cat 5 in 60 hours. Now, we're going to know if that intensity guidance is correct by tomorrow night. Okay, because if it's going to get to a Cat 5 as fast as that model has it, I mean, basically undergoes rapid deepening beginning at 2 p.m. tomorrow and culminating 24 hours after that. So actually by sometime early Thursday morning. So if it's going to do it, well, this time tomorrow night when we're doing the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at 7:35 p.m. Eastern time, if we're in a position to say that the system is strengthening rapidly, then you kind of know from there that you're going to at least get to a Cat 3 and maybe even a little bit possibly beyond that. The water temperatures are warming up. There's a few variables that we have to consider, though, Joe. There's Rich Rothmansky pointing out correctly. There's actually a fair amount of dry air over the Gulf Coast, over the Gulf states. It's not a saturated tropical air mass at the moment. It got to 93 today in Atlanta, by the way. Only got to 83 here at my house in North Georgia. But you'll notice on the radar there's an absolute lack of shower and thunderstorm activity across all of the South and all of the Gulf states right now. So the air is fairly dry. So we're gonna have to watch to see if that somehow, that could somehow get drawn into the flow and inhibit strengthening. We've seen that happen before. And then, of course, the other unknown variable is that upper low and how it orients itself down into the Gulf. It could orient itself in a way that promotes a very strong upper air outflow for the hurricane, in which case you'll wind up with a stronger storm, but it could also set up in a way where it could act as an inhibitor of strengthening, producing more shear, especially when it gets closer to the coastline. So, I mean, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of pieces to this. It's not, sometimes we get these storms where things are very clear cut. You just look at it, you know what it's going to do as far as strengthening is concerned. And as Joe, you and I both know, the Hurricane Center forecasters will tell you, they've gotten very good as far as track is concerned, but strengthening, strengthening and all the dynamics that are involved in strengthening is something that they don't always have a firm handle on.
I don't know if you had a chance, Joe, earlier today to look at the 12Z run of the NAM. Um,
No, but since you
and
bring it up, I'll put it up on the screen so we can
and
all
the
look at it.
12Z NAM number one is noticeably slower than the global models. The NAM, if you believe it and take it at face value, by 8 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, still has the storm in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. I would say about 150 or 175 miles due east of Tampa Bay, Florida. And the thing that really stands out with the NAM is the strength of the storm. They have Joe at 8 p.m. on Thursday, a 949 low pressure system
Yeah,
in
I
the
see it.
eastern Gulf. And
That was on the that was on the 12Z.
that was the 12Z. 949, by the way, in case you want to translate that to inches of mercury, is 28.02 inches. That's a fairly low center, if you will. And
Right.
I think on the intermediate, the 18Z,
It's a
they have
980.
right, and they also I think they've sped it up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the NAM, I haven't really looked at it very much in the last number of months because it's just become so unreliable and so swirly. But I mean, if we want to cherry pick, let's look at the HWRF, shall we?
Surely,
And the HWRF, this is the new 18Z, and this goes out 96 hours. So Thursday morning, Joe, it's a 9:47. Okay. Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, it's still about, I'm just gonna eyeball it here. It looks like it's about maybe 70 or so miles south of the coast. It's down to a 938. And when it comes ashore, it's a 934, all right, which would be a Cat 4. This is the HWRF, which loves to deepen storms, by the way. It just loves to do it. Now we have let's look at the HAFS, okay? The HAFS, and this is from the latest one. Now, this one has it as a 965, okay, which would make it a Cat 2 coming ashore. And I'll pull up another one. Let's go to there's an HAFSA, and then the B. So why don't we look at the B for this? And the B has it at a 968. Now, I think when I looked at this earlier, I think it was this one, a 12Z, was the one yeah, this was the one, I think. This one, Joe, was down to got it down to 897. 897 millibars, and still a fair distance from the coast, by the way. This would be at uh, 11 a.m. Thursday, and then landfall right around 8 o'clock at night at 9:19. So this, the earlier run, had it as a Cat 5. There's, the one thing I've noticed with all of this in the last, certainly in the last, say, 4 runs, there's a lot of variability from run to run with these pressures. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any, but none of these models seem to be producing any kind of consistency when it comes to, you know, how deep it's going to get or how deep it's not going to get. And I think that lends to the uncertainty about what are we talking about here? Is it going to be a Cat 2? Is it going to be a Cat 4 or 3? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. Too many variables, and they're not. We're gonna be basically working those variables out on the fly tomorrow and Wednesday.
Yeah, I think the more I look at these maps and the forward speed of this thing, this really is going to be trucking. We mentioned this last night, which will only add to the projected steady or the steady speed of the winds around the immediate center of the storm. I mean, I tell you, from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 2 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. on Thursday, right along the Big Bend coastline, those winds are going to be fierce. I mean, I tell you, it's really going to be something else. But also, I'm looking, Joe, and I think it was Rich Rotmansky mentioned this on the chat board. I went on the GFS site, precipitation and moisture. I went to the 700 to 300 millibar layer. That's the mid to upper level layer of moisture.
Would you
And
like
you,
to show them? Show everybody what
oh yeah, why not? If you can give me
Yeah, hold on just a second. Go ahead. It's all yours.
yeah, okay. You can see this moisture, dry is equivalent to, and on this map, the dry air is equivalent to, and why isn't anything moving now? Jeez.
Yeah,
This is what? This is 80. This is the
give it
84.
give it a click on the screen and then use your arrow key
Yeah,
to
here we
move it
go. Here
along.
we go. Here we go. Let me just make this a little larger. This is 18Z on Wednesday. So that's at 2 o'clock on Wednesday. You can see the blues are the darker the shade of blue, the more moisture, the wetter the atmosphere is, so to speak. Brown, just the other direction. The darker the shade of brown, the darker the hue, if you will, the drier the atmosphere is.
Well, go back a couple of more frames to tonight, just to show you look how dry it is. I mean, look how dry it is along the Gulf Coast and over Florida.
Right.
And so that could be an inhibiting factor. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. So right now, everything is dry and no problems at all along the Gulf Coast. Now, up comes the storm, which I believe will become Helene, and you could see right here. There's the center. This is 974. This is the 12Z run of the GFS I might add, and this is as of 8 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Now, watch watch carefully as the storm very quickly starts moving rapidly. It starts racing northeast up toward the Big Bend. It makes landfall right about here as a 950 millibar low pressure system, and you can see the big swath of blue here. This is a lot of tropical moisture that's sweeping around. But look also, look at this dry slot sweeping around from the north, northwest, and west around the underside of the storm. So yeah, the folks at Tallahassee were talking about this. Whatever they get in terms of rainfall from this is going to be quick. It's going to be hard hitting, but quick because as the storm moves inland, this is again 8 p.m. on Thursday, 2 a.m. on Friday. Look what happens. The storm now has moved up into southern Georgia, but look at the sweep of drier air at the mid and high levels, sweeping in and around and underneath the storm. So it may very well be that while the rains are coming down to beat the band for several hours during the late afternoon and early evening on Thursday in and around the Big Bend area, by 2 a.m., a lot of that is probably going to be either much lighter or could completely have ended because of that dry air filtering in and around. Now, here's where you are, Joe, right? That's approximately where you are, where the crosshair.
Yeah,
So,
it's hard for me to see on the wide shot here. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can bring it up on my big screen. Okay,
so you're right
uh,
about there, right?
yeah, about 30, right around 34, and yeah, that's about right. That's close.
And so here's you can see where the center of the storm. This, according to the 12Z GFS, the GFS run from earlier today, 967 low in southern Georgia. Then we go 6 hours later. This is excuse me. This is what am I looking here? What am I doing? Oh, okay, I see. Sorry about that. Hitting the wrong thing. Here you are at 8 a.m. On Friday morning, 950 millibars. The storm, Joe, the center of the storm. Look at how tightly packed the gradient still is here. And there's where you are. You're still apparently within the realm of tropical moisture, and probably will be
Right.
getting some
Well,
significant.
if the gradient is as tight as that, and it's the low is still somewhere in the 980s, which is possible because again, it's interacting with that upper low that's back over in Arkansas. So you get a, you know, when we say baroclinicity, we're talking about energy that's basically derived the way winter storms derive energy from sharpening shortwave troughs. It's a cold feature in the atmosphere. So I mean, that would produce. I would certainly be getting gusts of 40 to 60 in a situation like, and that's the thing that concerns me is the fact that it's holding on to that very low pressure, and you've got higher pressures up to the northeast because of a building high up in Canada. So the gradient is going to, the gradient is tight to begin with. It just the high only makes it that much tighter. So that's why I'm concerned about the wind as far north as I am.
And so that's 8 a.m. on Friday. Here's 2 p.m. on Friday. And notice we go from 980 to 993. Pressures are rapidly rising near the center, and the gradient significantly diminishes a bit during that 6 hour period. You're still, looks like, Joe, in the realm of getting lingering shower activity. But by that time, virtually the rest of Georgia at the mid and high levels has seen a nice sweep of much drier conditions. And finally, you get into that dry air by nightfall on Friday. And look how the storm really opens up now. It's a 1001 millibar storm, and it goes. It's amazing to see just how much it weakens over that span of 12 hours. Look at that. Look at the gradient here at 2 p.m. on Friday morning. Here it is at 8 a.m. on Friday. Here it is at 2 p.m. on Friday, and by the time we get to 8 p.m. on Friday, the storm is really not all that much of a storm anymore. And again, thanks to the fact that we have that big block over the northeast. Let's go back the to the eastern U.S. for a moment. It really shows up. Look at that sweep. Here's that upper low that's now moved offshore of New England. This is on Friday night, 8 p.m. And look at that sweep right here of dry air pouring in across the Northeast and New England down to the Mid Atlantic. Here's the storm. Here is what is left of Helene. And let's see what happens by 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Well, they don't even have an L anymore. There's a circle here, right here. So that's what's left of the storm. A little band of cloud cover and moisture across Virginia. But no, it's not never going to penetrate that solid wall of dry air that is all across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and New England. Ain't no way, Jose. There ain't no way that that's going to have any influence or any effect on the northeastern United States. And again, just because, in part to the diving low pressure system here you see it in northeastern Texas and southwestern Arkansas, just as that thing is diving on down, and here's that other system, that other upper low, pulling down that dry air across the Northeast. This hurricane or tropical cyclone or whatever it is by then just comes up, and it's like, well, what can I say? It's kind of like maybe your car ramming into a solid brick wall at 100 miles an hour. Boom! It's doing its level best to try to get through, but it ain't going to get through, and that pretty well is going to end up pretty much destroying your car. And in this case, this hurricane or tropical storm, by this time on Friday night, is going to be pretty well ripped apart or torn apart as well because of its inability to, break that big block to the north and northeast of it. And again, having some of the energy being sapped from it by that upper system that again is going to dive straight on down into the southern plains. So there you go. So all the action with this will be concentrated on Wednesday night into Thursday night, and we'll see how this all pans out, Joe. It looks like a very interesting forecast for those folks who live in the southeast, and especially around the Big Bend area of Florida.
Well, we're finishing up the first hour of the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. For those of you who are joining us, who joined the show midstream, we welcome you aboard. If you like the show, hit the like button. We're closing in on 80 likes. We love it when we go over 100. And we're on, just as a reminder, we're on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. And if we have to add shows for Friday and Saturday, we will certainly let you know about it ahead of time. Meanwhile, on the radar, just going back to some current weather that's going on in the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states, we've got some spotty light showers. Surprise, surprise. Northeast Virginia on up through New England, just sort of, blips of popcorn here. Nothing of consequence. Very light rain
I
in
beg to
some
differ.
places. What, it's
I beg to differ.
pouring? It's
I
pouring
beg to
by
differ
you?
about nothing. You say nothing of consequence. I had my day planned, Joe. You
Well,
want to
no,
see how
that's your, but that's Joe. That's your, you. If you recall, I asked you last night. I said, "Did you put rain in the forecast for tomorrow?" And you
and
said
I
no.
I said no.
So that was your
Yes.
consequence. That's the consequence of you not putting rain in your forecast.
Here, put the camera on me, Joe. I wear this every time
All
I
right,
get on
hold
the
on,
tractor.
just a
You folks
second.
who,
There you go.
okay, this is what I was planning to do today. Whenever I plan to do the lawn, it's I wear my Lawn Ranger Rides Again T-shirt, except for one problem. At 11 o'clock, I looked out the window and I said a few words which are not printable and not usable here on these airwaves. But I immediately, and I didn't get all that much, Joe. I probably got maybe a hundredth of an inch of rain, but you know what a hundredth of an inch of rain will do to the lawn. It will moisten it up to a degree where there ain't no way I'm going to be able to do the lawn until it dries out, and it didn't dry
Right.
out at all during the course of the day. So my day, my plans were totally shot in doing the lawn
Oh,
this
well,
Monday.
pshaw, pshaw.
All
Uh,
because of that. All because of that little bitty popcorn type activity, which unfortunately decided to pop right over my house.
well, that happens sometimes. We've got some showers tonight in Western Ohio, in through Eastern Kentucky, and also a few clusters in Central and Eastern Tennessee and into Western North Carolina. a few blips in southeast Georgia. Another concentration of heavier downpours. Looks like St. Louis, as we speak, is probably getting some heavy downpours in a thunderstorm in this cluster from central Illinois down into southeast Missouri. And we've got some line of showers from eastern North Dakota and western Minnesota southwestward into western Nebraska. But it doesn't look like there's any thunderstorms in there. And not a drop anywhere in the western part of the U.S. The Storm Prediction Center tonight holding a marginal risk from southeast Missouri and northern Arkansas, east across much of Tennessee and Kentucky into western North Carolina and northwestern South Carolina. So that generally means isolated severe thunderstorms, not organized severe weather. Now, they've added a slight risk for tomorrow in eastern Kentucky, a marginal risk that covers all of most just about all of Ohio, most of Indiana and West Virginia, western North Carolina, northern South Carolina, North Georgia, North Alabama, Northeast Mississippi, and most of Tennessee except the far west. And that comes with a small 2% tornado risk from Northeast Indiana to a small little corner of northern West Virginia and Southwest PA. And when we look to day three, and day three is Wednesday into Thursday morning, we just have a broad area of general thunderstorms from Texas to Florida, northward to upstate New York, Pennsylvania, western New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia. You get the idea. Rainfall forecast from WPC, they've got a general, pretty large area of 5 to 7 inch rainfall amounts and a couple of those darker brown spots on the coast of North Florida of 7 to 10. But it's mostly 5 to 7 that extends through the eastern Gulf, through much of the state of Georgia into eastern. I'll tell you one thing: the rain, if even half of that materializes in North Georgia, everybody will be happy here because it's been like a dust bowl uh, here since the beginning of August. Actually, since the very end of July, very beginning of August, we have hardly had any rain here, and it's the rivers are down, so everything's dry. The ground is like concrete. You got to run sprinklers all day to keep the plants alive. So even if we get half of that, it would be a good thing from that standpoint. We do have 5 to 7 inch rain amounts being indicated. I'm sorry, 7 to 10 inch rain amounts being indicated for the mountains of western North Carolina. That's something to pay attention to for the folks in the western North Carolina and northwest South Carolina. If the low kind of goes out a little further east before it pivots back to the northwest, there might be, not only get that tropical moisture in there, but you're going to have an east southeast wind, so they'll be upslope, and that's going to probably produce more. That may enhance the rainfall a bit more, and it does show some heavier amounts back through southern Missouri and into northern Arkansas. And as far as what's going on in the Northeast, of course, and in the northern Mid-Atlantic states, with this weather front that comes through. Not much happens tomorrow. Should be an okay day, although the onshore wind flow continues. Wednesday, as this next front approaches, maybe some showers later Wednesday into Wednesday night, some lingering into part of Thursday, the early part of Thursday, and then as long as we don't get any surprises from this stuff in the south lifting northward, it should be okay for Friday and for the weekend. So you've got that. So the general dry pattern in the Northeast, the Great Lakes, the Upper Ohio Valley, um, the northern Mid-Atlantic states, that looks like that's going to continue um, into the last days of the month of September.
Did you notice who's on the chat board, Joe?
Besides Izzy D.
How
Oh, Bill
about
Goodman. Yes, I
Bill?
see. Nobody
Hey,
from WPC lurking. Oh, that's what you think, Bill. But okay, yes. But Upton, on the other hand, well, we love the Upton guys. Big hugs to everybody at Upton if you're watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And also, if the folks at Mount Holly are watching, big hugs to you guys too. We love you both.
hey, we missed
Um,
you, Bill. I mean, Faye Marone and Dominic Ramuni from your home office came out to Connecticut on Saturday. We missed you. We would have loved to have seen you out there as well, but maybe next time. The next time I think they're going to have another weather conference in Connecticut will be 2 years from now in 2026.
Izzy D wants to come out to my property and plant fescue grass. That's the one thing I will not have on my property is grass. Okay, I have a small portion at the roadside that my neighbor cuts for me, and thank God for Addison because he cuts it for me. I don't have to buy a lawnmower, and I take him out to dinner, once or twice a couple of times a month, and and I feed him, so he's happy, and I'm happy. I want nothing to do with a lawn anymore. Nothing. Okay. I like my wild growth that I have.
You see, Joe, now if you were married to the executive producer, that would not cut anything because I've always said I have a brown thumb, but there are just a few things I have to do out there. One of them is mow that lawn, and she gave me a pass today. She understood I really wanted to do it, and unfortunately, the rain or the drizzle or the sprinkles came and wet everything up. Tomorrow, I don't know I'm going to be able to do it. We're watching the grandchild tomorrow, and I don't want to wake the grandchild up with the sound of a lawnmower or a leaf blower. So maybe Wednesday. No, not Wednesday. Wednesday looks like it's going to rain lightly again too. Well, I'll get around to it one of these fine days.
Okay. I think we'll hold off on Briller Jeopardy while all this is going on because we've already gone over an hour, which we haven't done in a while, and
Right.
we're 8 likes short of 100. So if you guys could like put us over the top for 100 likes. And
Hit that button.
you get an hour long weather show. There's no commercials anymore. It hasn't been for a long time now. There's no commercials during the show. There's no even, no, not even in the middle after 30 minutes. You get a nonstop commercial free here. Oh, that big boost. They all came at once, Joe. So we got the 100.
Hey, so ring the bell, Joe. 106, actually. Thank you. Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right. So now since we don't have commercials, this is where I'm going to remind everybody that if you would like to support our channel and you shop on Amazon, by all means, use our referral link at the top of the chat board or on the descriptor to this podcast. Uh, Go in there, use the search bar, get what you want, shop. They ship it to you. Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin out of their pocket and not out of your pocket. And this way, uh, Joe and I get to eat another meal or so every once in a while. All right, so we do appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Yes, because
Oh, one thing I did not mention this at all, and I know we have baseball fans on the chat board, and we are aware that the impending rain that's going to arrive in Georgia is going to have a big say in what happens with the Mets against the Atlanta Braves. Biggest series of the year. Both teams fighting for that final wild card spot. Mets could win it if they take 2 out of 3 from the Braves Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's a 3-game series. The question is, how is the weather going to impact all of this? And we'll see how this all pans out. Thursday don't look good at all. Wednesday, it looks like there will be rain. Whether or not they try to play in the rain or wait it out or whatever, that's a question. The only day I think of the 3 that they may be able to get in from start to finish will be tomorrow night. So after that, all bets are off. And I don't know what they would do if the rain was so severe that they wouldn't be able to play either Wednesday or Thursday. It reminds me, it's reminiscent of 1973, Joe, when the Mets were coming down to the wire and trying to win the division. They went up to Chicago to play the Cubs at Wrigley Field. 2 consecutive days of heavy duty rain forced them into playing back to back doubleheaders. Let's see if the Players Union allows that today. But they had to play a doubleheader on a Sunday and they had to play on a Monday. The Monday game was actually, or games were after the season had officially ended, and they still hadn't figured out yet who was going to win the division. So, but eventually the Mets won on that Monday one game, and when they won the division, they said, "Ah, to heck with it. We don't have to play the second game. The ground is too wet." And then that's when they popped open the champagne. What happens this year? Again, with Helene heading their way and a big series in Atlanta, and whether or not they were able to settle the issue as to who gets the wild card. I don't know, but we'll be watching to see. Again, I think they'll be able to play tomorrow night. Wednesday, highly questionable, and Thursday, I think forget about it. I don't know what they'll do beyond that. So we'll see.
All right, so we'll be back tomorrow. I just checked to see. I'll give you one more check. There's a few extra minutes have passed. Nope, still don't have the zero Z guidance package yet. So tomorrow night we will be back at our usual time, 7:35 p.m. So,
7:35.
and thank you for the 115 likes. Uh, Most appreciated. We love it when we
And
get
Tom,
over 100.
And Tom Contino, Joe, he says, Joe Rayo, how can they reschedule the games? The season ends on Sunday. You weren't listening, Tom. In 1973, in 1973, 2 days of rain, back-to-back doubleheaders in Chicago, Mets against the Cubs. They played a doubleheader. They were going to play a doubleheader on Monday, which was actually the day after the season ended. But the divisional title was still in doubt, so they had to play on Monday, even though the schedule said, okay, the season's over. They had to play that game. So I don't know what to tell you. If they can't play these games in Atlanta Wednesday or Thursday, and they still don't know by the end of Sunday who's going to get that final wild card, they'll play on Monday or Tuesday or whenever. They've got to do that. They've got to settle the issue somehow. So we'll see what happens. It makes for an interesting end of the baseball season.
All right, so we'll see you everybody tomorrow night. Bye bye.
Goodbye, folks.